Hi, welcome to Kelowna. We're right here on Okanagan Lake. It's a beautiful day. We're right next to the Visitor Center. I'm Gord Hotchkiss from Gillard, Okanagan. This is a statue of Chief Sukanshu. This is the perfect time and the perfect place to acknowledge that we're on the unceded territory of the Okanagan Syilx people. At Gillard, Okanagan, we do bike tours, but our bike tours are a little bit different because for us, the most important thing are the stories we tell on those tours. They're actually stories you ride through. And over the years, we've picked some incredibly interesting stories that I want to share some of my favorite ones with you today. And the other thing is, these stories are in really interesting places that act as a great guide to explore everything that Kelowna has to offer. Our first story is actually not far from here at all. It's a short walk. So why don't we head over there right now? So the question you're probably asking yourself is, why is our first story by a statue of a bear with a public washroom underneath? Well, there's a bear here for a very good reason, and that reason has to do with how Kelowna got its name. But really, the more interesting story here is about the gentleman behind that story, a gentleman by the name of August Gillard. I'm going to tell you that story, but we're just going to head up to be a little closer to the statue first. August Gillard was known as the Old Grizzly Hunter, which is a clue about why we have a statue of a grizzly in downtown Kelowna. But really, as I tell you this story, it's going to sound like a plot for an adventure movie, and it was. August Gillard was one of those bigger-than-life characters. Unfortunately, the end of the story is not really a happy one. This is a picture of August Gillard, the Old Grizzly Hunter. We don't know exactly when it was taken, but it was likely taken sometime around 1895. And if so, that would mean August is about 70 years old in it. He had, by that time, already led an exceptional life. This picture was definitely staged. Gillard would have posed for it. And the picture was meant to tell a story of a local town character. But what I find fascinating are the eyes. To me, that's what really tells this story. August Gillard was born in a little village in France in 1825, just a few kilometers from the Swiss border. He became a blacksmith by trade, but really, he was an adventurer at heart. When August was 25, he sailed from Marseille with his friend Jules Blondeau, leaving a childhood sweetheart behind. Gillard and Blondeau set off for the goldfields of San Francisco. August promised he would send for his love back in France when he struck it rich. This is a picture of San Francisco in 1850. It's the frantically growing city August and Jules would have landed in. The reason there are so many ships in the harbor is that as soon as they got to San Francisco, the crews would abandon ship so they could go try their luck in the goldfield. That left the ships stuck in the harbor, where many were converted to hotels, taverns, boarding houses, shops, or warehouses. One even became a jail. Many of these ships still lay buried below present-day San Francisco. August Gillard would stay in San Francisco for almost a decade, but he never struck it rich. By 1860, the California gold rush was over, but there was news of new gold strikes coming down the coast from the British territories to the north. In 1860, he sailed north to British Columbia with Blondeau for a new gold strike in the Fraser Canyon. There are rumors that Gillard and Blondeau did have some run-ins with the local population. That's not surprising. The two got there at the tail end of the Fraser Canyon War. There had been a number of clashes between the influx of new miners from the south and the Inglakatma, part of the Salish nation. Tensions still ran high between the two. Whatever the reason, it said that one day, Gillard, a sturdy man who was exceptionally strong, came back to find Blondeau trapped down a shaft by a Salish man holding a rifle on him. Gillard approached from behind and attacked him with his bare hands, killing him instantly. If this story is true, it explains the pair's rapid departure from the area. Both Gillard and Blondeau would know that that territory was no longer safe for them. They hurriedly packed up their few belongings and hightailed it to Hope, where they met Father Charles Pandozzi, the Oblate missionary from the Okanagan. They walked the 300 kilometers over the Dewdney Trail with Pandozzi to his mission near present-day Kelowna. After arriving in 1862, Blondeau and Gillard each preempted a 320-acre parcel to start their homesteads. Gillard's lands, primarily swamplands that stretch east from Okanagan Lake, would one day become downtown Kelowna. At the time, what few European settlers there were here were scattered around the Okanagan Mission, about 4 kilometers from Gillard's homestead. There, Eli Lequim had built a store and, more importantly, a saloon, which became a favorite destination for Gillard. There, August would gather a crowd as he told his stories, including one of being cornered up a tree by a grizzly. Because of stories like this, he became known as the Old Grizzly Hunter. In his first few years here, Gillard wintered in a traditional winter home which had been used for thousands of years by the Syilx people. One day, he heard noises outside and decided to go investigate. The source of the noises were 2 Syilx young men who were walking by. When they saw August crawling out of his house in the middle of winter with a full beard and probably dressed in a fur robe, the 2 started laughing. That day, Gillard got his other name, Kimekju, the Syilx word for brown bear. This was added to the growing collection of tales about August Gillard. If we look at this page from the 1881 Canadian census, we see August was still on his farm living next to his longtime friend Blondeau. But unfortunately, August loved horse racing, gambling, and liquor, and much of the property he had was used to finance these vices. Perhaps that's why he conveyed his property to Bernard and Leon Lequim on March 1st, 1890, giving them the land they needed to lay out their new town site. In 1892, when they were looking for a name for that new town, they remembered the story of Gillard and Kimekju, but decided it would be too difficult a name to pronounce. So they substituted the Syilx word for grizzly, Kelowna, or today, Kelowna. By 1891, the next census shows that August was now a lodger with his nephew, Fred Gillard. Soon, even the money he would have gotten from his land was probably gone. Even though he was a bachelor for his entire life, Gillard continued to exchange letters with his sweetheart in France. Even after all those years apart, she wrote that they would finish their days together if it is as you said in your pleadings. But that reunion never took place. On May 7th, 1898, the old grizzly hunter died, alone and destitute. He was 73. If we're right about the date of this photo, it was probably taken just a few years before August's death. He likely would have already lost much of what he owned, but you can still see August Gillard was bigger than life in every way. That's probably why, when civilization finally found him, that life was just a little too big to be tied down. Gillard's story is not unique. There were many that were caught between the frontier and civilization when it came. It was a hard transition for many. Most are long forgotten, but for this one, we have the name of Kelowna and a statue of a grizzly to remember him by. So, from those beginnings, we have Kelowna now, with everything you see behind me. We're actually going to go to the heart of the city now, the foot of Bernard, where it all began, where this city started just over 125 years ago. Let's head up there. We're here at the foot of Bernard. This is the main street of Kelowna. And it was here that Bernard Lequim, when he laid out the town site, really wanted the heart of his new town to be. Transportation was really critical to towns back then. And in a lot of places in Western Canada, that transportation was provided by railroad. But that wouldn't be the case here in Kelowna. In Kelowna, it would be over 30 years before Kelowna got its rail connection. So being close to the lake was really important, which is why the lake is right behind me. This is where huge paddle wheelers would actually dock, and they were the main transportation link for Kelowna. And so it made perfect sense for the main street to end right at the wharf docks. Actually, while we're down here, there's one more thing I want to show you. It's a really interesting building that most people walk by and never realize what the story is behind it. We're on Bernard Avenue, and we're just actually across from the sales at the foot of Bernard. And the building that's right behind me actually was the LeQuinn General Store. They built it right across from the ferry docks, which made sense. They wanted to be the closest to the transportation link. This is actually the oldest existing building on Bernard Avenue. And you'll see the front is built of brick, but if I go around the corner here, you'll see that this building is actually built of stone. The Queen's original store was built of wood on Bernard Avenue and was on this site. They actually moved it a couple of blocks down and built this of stone that was quarried just over on Knox Mountain. The advantage, of course, is stone doesn't burn, wood does, and the LeQuinns and a lot of the other early business people in Kelowna learned their lesson when their buildings burnt down. This was the first one that really marked the beginning of Bernard Avenue as a more permanent place. Walking down Bernard Avenue is a great opportunity to reach out and touch, literally touch, Kelowna's history. But we're going to talk about other parts of Kelowna history, and our next stop, the next place we're going to go, is across the lake to West Kelowna.